Welcome back to another installment of Pages. This week we're going to be reading Dragonhaven by Robin McKinley. Let's read the blurb. Think yourself out of your comfy chair in your nice house with the roads and the lights outside, and the ceiling overhead low enough that thief dragons can't stand on her hind legs and not bump her head. And think yourself into a cavern full of dragons. Go on, try. Jake lives with his scientist father at the Makepeace Institute of the Integrated Dragon Studies in Smoke Hill National Park. Smoke Hill is home to about 200 of the few remaining Draco Australians, which is extinct in the wild. There are 5 million acres of the Smoke Hill wilderness, and the dragons rarely show themselves. Jake's never seen one except in the park and at a distance. They stay away from the Institute and tourists, but dragon conservation is controversial. Detractors say dragons are much too dangerous and much too expensive, and should be destroyed. Supporters say there is no record of their doing anything more threatening than eating sheep. There are only a few hundred of them left at best, and they must be protected. But they are up to 80 feet long, plus tail, and breathe fire. On Jake's first overnight solo in the park, he meets the dragon, the thing that he would have said he wanted above everything else in the world. But the dragon is dying next to the human she has killed. Jake knows this news could destroy Smoke Hill. The dead man is clearly a poacher who attacked first, but this will be lost in the outcry against all dragons. But then Jake notices something even more urgent. The dragon had just given birth, and one of the babies is still alive. So, let's get right into the first pages. Chapter 1. I keep having these conversations with Dad. I'm at my computer. He says, "What are you doing?" I mutter something, because the screen has a lot of squiggles on it, so he already knows what I'm doing. "Have you started on it yet, Jake?" "No," I say, probably more belligerently than I mean to. But we've had this conversation so often. Dad sighs. "Jake, I know I'm nagging you, but it's important." "So is the dictionary important." "It's not important to anyone, but you if only you can read it," says Dad. I glare at him, because he knows that I know that he knows it is important, but that's also an excuse. "I don't know how to write it," I mutter. Just by the way, I do know how to write my dictionary, which I don't either, in spite of the fancy graphics package. "That doesn't matter. Just write it," he tries to make a joke. "Your spelling is pretty good." "I don't know how. I can't make it a story," I shout, or rather, I don't shout. I sort of hiss it through clenched teeth. I want to shout. It's not. It doesn't have. There's. No. I can't think of how to finish. I can't think how to begin. It doesn't have to be a story. It doesn't have to be anything. Just put down what happened. Don't call it anything. "Yeah, right. Make a pizza without tomato sauce and mozzarella. Just don't call it pizza, and you'll be fine." What's the use of pizza without tomato sauce and mozzarella? Like Alice said before she saw the White Rabbit. What is the use of a book without pictures or conversations? Although the pictures are covered really well elsewhere, and the new coffee table, drop it on your foot and spend the rest of your life on crutches art book version is coming out soon. Text, I have to say, by some chucklehead sensitive type. Yuck. The thought of it is one of the things that's getting me going here, finally. The sensitive version will probably be way too much like a story, a fairy tale. But who lives a story, with chapters and things? And as a fairy tale hero, if someone gave me a vorpal blade, I'd probably stick it in my foot, or get lost in the Mimsy Boro groves. Life is just one day after another, even when the days are really, really strange. Dad looks at me. I look at him. We both know what we're both thinking. I prod a couple of keys and make the squiggles go squigglier. "Just do the best you can," Dad says, really gently. "You're the only one who can tell it at all." Yes, that's the awful thundering can't get around it thing. I'm the only one who can tell you about Lois, and the only way I can tell Lois a story is through me. I feel like starting by saying, I'm not a crazed egomaniac. Really, I'm not. I'm a crazed Loisiac. Joke. Sort of. But it's not only the freaking hard work of trying to write it all coherently that is stopping me now. I don't want to go back there. I've got used to being able to go look out windows again and not worried about what I might see. Also, a lot of the stuff that's about me is stuff I don't want to tell anyone. It's also a lot about Dad and me. I don't want to tell those parts either, down on paper and everything where he can read them, which he will. I may not know how to write my dictionary, but at least it's not embarrassing. There's another problem. I should really make a list. I don't remember every day as every day, as different from the day before and the day after. Sure, I keep notes. I keep lots and lots of notes, but I seem to have left a lot of stuff out. All the connecting bits, all the conversations, all the sane bits, if there were any sane bits. I was just trying to stay alive. Those days, keep Lois and me alive, and I wasn't thinking in terms of needing to make a story out of it later on. And I sure don't remember every conversation I've had in the last 4 years. I remember a few of them, the ones that really got to me for one reason or another. But mostly, who remembers? Not me, and I bet not you either. I don't mean the ordinary everyday ones you have a lot, like, how are you? And what's for dinner? And I thought it was your turn to cook. Those are easy. I mean the one-off ones. The ones while you're trying to write something someone else is going to read it all. So that while you're writing stuff is a lot of stuff you can't remember well enough to write. There weren't many conversations anyway. Not a lot of he says and she says, or at least not till the end. And then they're peculiar. But I'm going to try to tell the truth, except for the parts I'm leaving out, because there's still stuff I'm not just going to tell you. Get used to it. And then, okay, I've got this far. I'm not staring out the window. My fingers are on the keyboard. The first finger is wiggling over the first key for the first letter of the first word, whatever that is. And then I stop all over again. Because how do I get your attention? Not your newspaper headline attention, your real attention. How do I tell you the stuff that you need to know if you're going to understand what happened? Because there's really no point if I'm not trying to make you understand a little. And just by the way, who are you? Dad and Martha say there are a lot of people, a lot of you. Is it going to be easier to think of you as you? Or is that going to be weird me out even more? Who don't know anything and will only be picking this up because the headlines have made you curious about the whole show. And if I want to rave on a little as background, that's probably okay, and maybe even a good idea. I guess they figure if they get me raving, they've won. They're probably right. So blame them, although they did say rave a little. It would be easier to start now and go backwards, but then you'd never understand. I'm going to have to start all those years ago, and I don't know how to feel like I felt before Lois, or how to get back there to tell the story the way that it happened, so maybe you'll understand. At all. Even a little. Mom should be here, reading this and saying things like, Lois and I, dear, not me and Lois, and telling me when it's whom and not who, but she isn't. Mom is one of the reasons I don't want to write any of this. I keep wondering, would it have happened at all? Would Lois have happened if Mom was still here? If I hadn't been the right kind of nutcase? Was being a nutcase necessary? Eventually I thought about Eleanor. She never worries about getting anybody's attention, and that eventually would really annoy her. Or whether they're going to be interested if she wants something. And there are always he says and she says when Eleanor is around. She says, anyway. Eleanor doesn't have the hugest sense of humor in the world about herself, but I think she'll get this one. That I'm also going to start 4.5 years ago, with her shouting at me. Also, Eleanor shouting is very memorable. Jake! That's Eleanor. She has a great future as an alarm system. She's only 7, but she has precocious lungs. Jake! I threw my window open. I'm coming! Keep your hair on! She glared up at me. You're late. I looked at my watch. I won't be late for another 2 minutes. We'll be late by the time we get there. I closed my window, sighed, put my shoes on, and ran downstairs. Our apartment is at one end of the Institute, but nothing is very far from anything else. I flew by a group of tourists gaping at the Draco family charts that stand at the way into the diorama and the tiny movie theater, past the ticket booth and the door to the gift shop and cafe, waved at Peggy in the ticket booth as she said, Jake, don't run, and was standing beside Eleanor in 45 seconds. She hadn't finished glaring yet, and stomped off down the path that led to the zoo, barreling through the thickets of tourists like a cavalry charge. I followed. Offered to hold Eleanor's hand? Not if you don't want it bitten off. Of course, there are no highways for her to run across without looking both ways inside the park gates. The only vehicles that come in and out through the gates are our Rangers Jeeps, which were bought more for endurance than for speed, and from age and the effects of the surfaces they run on, tend to kind of lurch along anyway. Our park tour buses crawl even slower, so everyone has a chance to take lots of photos and go, "Ooh!" They're solar powered and can't go any faster. Tourist cars and coaches stay in the parking lot outside. Even the garages for the staff's private vehicles is outside the gates. This is not a major issue. If you work here, you probably can't afford a private vehicle. And the nearest highway, with like more than 2 lanes, is 50 miles away on the far side of Wilsonville. This was Eleanor's first week being allowed to help out at the zoo, and she was a little crazed. I was a little crazed, because the grown-ups had decided that Martha was too young to mentor her, but I was old enough. I'm not sure the Incredible Hulk is old enough to mentor Eleanor, and Martha is actually pretty good at it. I'm not. I would be okay once we got there, and in another week or two Eleanor should have calmed down a little. I hoped. But meanwhile, at 1:55 every afternoon, there was a small two-legged elephant trumpeting under my window. A normal 7-year-old would be happy helping to feed baby raccoons at the orphanage. Not Eleanor. No one comes to Smoke Hill for the raccoons, and she wants to be where more of the action is. I don't really mind Eleanor, though. In some ways, she's restful. She's too young to remember my mom very well, or Snark. If you think that sounds really sicko, you try being 12 years old when your mother dies and having everyone around you looking at you and thinking of her and feeling sorry for you. It doesn't help that I look like her. Right after she died, right after we knew she was dead, and people started looking at me like that, I started spending a lot of my time in front of the mirror, rubbing my cheeks with my fingers. Well, maybe it was more like scratching my cheeks with my fingers, because I started leaving marks. Dad asked why. I said I was hoping my beard would come in early. I didn't say, because then people would look at me like my mother. Dad was almost the only person who didn't look at me in the new way. But then, he was the only other person who was missing as I was. Dad said, "Oh." He didn't ask me why I wanted my beard to come in early. Maybe he guessed. Dad has a beard which he keeps short and tidy, so he can make a good impression on the tourists and the ground administrators. He scratched his own hairy cheeks for a minute and added, "You may not if it does." I stopped scratching my cheeks. And now, it was 2.5 years later, and my beard still hadn't started coming in, but people didn't look at me so much like at that anymore, so I could wait. Okay, Eleanor and I were usually about a minute late, and Martha was usually there first, lining out the buckets and checking there that the labels were all still legible. If anyone got the wrong grub, there'd be trouble from Eric if nothing else. Trouble from Eric is way more than enough, however. "Hiya," she'd say. "Huh," Eleanor'd say, really offhand and casual. "What we've got?" It's quieter inside the big shed where the food lives. No tourists. That's another one of the big draws for Eleanor, of course. Being seen by a lot of grown-ups to be going somewhere they can't. I no longer care about the aspect of it, but if nagged, I would admit that I remembered when I did. But just getting away from them. The tourists was always at Smoke Hill, where there's all that gorgeous, amazing, wonderful, empty space just behind you, so to speak. But you live in like this tiny, permanently besieged encampment, where you have to take a kind of deep breath and bolt for it when you go from one cranny of no tourists to the next. I don't particularly want to, because it makes me feel like more of a mutant than I ever did, but I suppose I should emphasize that life at Smoke Hill is kind of bizarre. Certainly us kids were always being told, or asked, that wasn't the way we lived. Peculiar? Uh, pardon me, but I was born here, so I didn't like being asked or told. Other kids were the worst. They said things like, "No pizza?" Like you might say, "No oxygen?" Of course we have pizza, but no, we couldn't call up the local super pizza to deliver, that's true. Eleanor wouldn't touch the bugs and beetles, and the bigger live, or soon to be knocked out on the head, stuff Eric or Katie would deal with, but she put the vegetables and fruit in the buckets after Martha or I cut it up if it needed cutting. Madagascarinesis is such a lazy slob, it won't eat its carrots unless they're chopped up first. She wasn't really that much help, since we had to keep a sharp eye on her. She felt that fairness meant everybody got the same thing, but most of the fun food, is whatever the Wilsonville and Cheyenne supermarkets feel like sending us of the stuff that's still around after its sell-by date. For example, citrus gives Russo diarrhea. But Eleanor and I will get older, and living at Smoke Hill is weird enough. So it's good if you feel involved. But how many kids get to help out at the zoo? Who needs normal? Although Martha and I both put our hours in at the orphanage. But then the orphanage is pretty good too. I like little furry baby things, which there aren't any of at the zoo. Maybe I'm more normal than Eleanor. After a lot at the zoo, something warm, furry, or feathery is a nice change too, even if it may throw up all over you. And then there's warm and furry like a Yukon wolf cub. If Eleanor's lucky, someday she'll get to hold the broom for it to tear out the throat of a guy while the sedative gun gets into position. We'd only just started by the time Katie arrived. Katie makes everyone feel nicer and calmer just by being there, even her daughters. I mean, even Eleanor. Martha is a lot like Katie herself, but after Katie got there, Eleanor stopped arguing that since she didn't like celery, nobody else was going to like celery either. Then Eric showed up, and things went into decline again. Even Katie can't do much without Eric. But Dad says he's a good keeper, and not everyone wants to live 100 miles from the nearest real restaurants, work 12 or 14 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week, and get paid badly. We're lucky to have him. That's Dad's way of saying, shut up. It's a lot better than saying shut up, but nothing is ever going to make me like Eric. We got the buckets sorted and started carrying them out. Eleanor is not only 7 and the youngest, but she's not exactly large, even for 7. Martha's small for her age too, but she's 12, and only an Eleanor type 7-year-old would insist on carrying a bucket too big and heavy for her. But of course, she does. I'll take Russo, she says, every day. Russo's her favorite. Russo is also at the far end of cages, and Martha and I have to dawdle getting the others to set out to give her time. And then she and Martha have this little ritual of Eleanor pretending not to notice that Martha has to lift and dump the food through the chute because Eleanor can't. She's going to wear that bucket out, dragging it like that, said Eric. You tell her, I said. Eric glared at me, but I was doing him a favor, giving an excuse for a good glare. Once Eric was there to deal with the serious food, Katie and I could get started on the cages. Here's a good example of what passes in Eric's case for humor. When I turned 13, the grown-ups decided it was time I had some real chores, not just some food detail at the zoo, or helping unpack and stack stuff for the gift shop. Especially given my talent for leaving drifts of styrofoam munchies and stomp pop bubble wrap in my wake. It had kind of seemed to me that my time at the orphanage should have counted, but maybe it didn't, because I never had night duty, and because there was always an adult with me. Or maybe because I've been getting underfoot at the orphanage since I was a baby, and Mom used to bring me along while she put in her time, and it was like I was too regular, and nobody noticed. Anyway, I volunteered for cage cleaning because I knew odoratus doesn't make me sick the way that it does a lot of people, and by doing it, I knew I'd get extra slack for when I screwed up elsewhere, which was definitely an issue. Eric accepted my offer fast enough, but he couldn't let it go without telling everyone that the reason I didn't mind odoratus was because I was a teenage boy. Very funny, Eric. That doesn't explain Katie, who also volunteered for odoratus, who is not only a girl, I mean, a woman, herself, but has 2 daughters, and her slob of a husband isn't around anymore if the idea is you have to live with slobbiness to be able to deal. Katie's husband isn't dead, but he might as well be, since nobody ever sees him, including his daughters. That may be another reason I kind of like Eleanor. I don't think feeling sorry for people is ever going to come easily to Eleanor, but it wouldn't occur for her to feel sorry for me because my mom's dead. As far as she's concerned, we're even, because her dad's dead. Eleanor has a very black and white view of the world. That's restful too sometimes, except when you're on her hit list. She didn't get it from Katie. Katie has no hit list. Katie volunteered for Odoratus so no one else had to do it. That's what she's like. And between her, me, and Eric, no one else does have to do it. Aren't we just the three stooges of wonderfulness? She tried really hard to be careful after my mom died and not look at me funny or anything, but it's like she got it too well instead, so when other people started forgetting, she didn't. I mean, well, I'll give you an example. This happened only a few weeks before Eleanor got the okay to start helping at the zoo. You clean any of the Draco cages by halves with you in one half, the Draco safely imprisoned in the other half. But Odoratus is unique in that he and his harem and the juvie males are not only behind bars, but behind a glass partition as well. Okay, 1 second. The cat wants in the room. We say it's for the chorus, but even us tough guys can only do so much. We also usually do Odoratus in pairs to get it over faster, but we were doing it really macho that day. No pairs to get it over fast, but we were doing it really. Oh, masks and helmets. Nice cool day with no breeze. You can just about get away with it with the overhead vent open. And you're going to need a shower afterward anyway. So when this school group led by this thumping big, I mean, nincompoop, stopped to look at our big male Odoratus, who was busy flapping his ears, let's see, and showing off. Right next door, we could hear exactly what he was saying to his students. He had one of those bellowing voices, like he was used to lecturing to thousands. I mean, we could hear exactly. The kids looked a little older than me, and that made it worse somehow. It should have been funny. The nincompoop baying and posturing, and Odoratus flapping and posturing back, but it wasn't. I probably started to get sore and maroon, which could have just been the smell, but Katie knows me pretty well. Steady, Jake, she said. It's all crap, I muttered, so he couldn't possibly overhear me. It doesn't matter how pissed off any of us smoke hill lifers get. We always think of how something's going to look to the tourists. And he's pretending to teach those kids. Katie's usually brighter than this. Maybe the smell was getting to her. She got sympathetic. Jake, she said gently, there's a lot of crap out there. It's not worth getting mad at all the time, okay? You've got better things to do. Think about the game money that brought us and forget the rest. I stared at her, feeling as if my whole head was getting redder and redder, like they turned off the lights. You could have seen in the dark by the growth of my head. Why was she saying this to me? Why was it so upsetting so much that she was saying this? She was only telling the truth. Crap was crap, and there was a lot of it around. But this was probably crap that killed my mother. No one will admit this, but that's probably what happened. Is that the guide she promised didn't show, and she had to sit there watching her 6 month sabbatical from school going for nothing. And she found somebody else to take her, and that somebody wasn't good enough, and either got